And we are back here on the Midweek mailbag. Myself, Jeremy Reisman, and Eric Schlitt, answering your Lions questions as we head towards the offseason, deeper into the offseason, I should say. And of course, one of the bigger parts of the offseason, much to my dismay, is mock drafts. And Dane Brugler from The Athletic set the Lions fandom on fire this week with his 2-round mock. But the most important part, or the most contentious part, was trading up from 18 to 16, burning, I think, the top of the two Lions' second-round picks in the process, and grabbing Anthony Richardson, also trading with the Packers, which is also funny and interesting and all that sort of stuff. So we got a lot of questions about this trade and Anthony Richardson in general. Let's start with Matt Boucher, who asks, I keep seeing Anthony Richardson mocked to the Lions at 18, even by people that watch the Lions Goff this year. Given Goff's performance and our needs on D, I'm having a hard time understanding why we go quarterback in the first. Do you think, first of all, basic question, do you think the Lions will go quarterback at 18?
I think the only quarterback they would consider would be Anthony Richardson because of the arc of him as a player, right? He needs time to develop, and they are in a situation where they have that time available with Goff. They seem to have made a decision publicly on supporting Goff at the same time. They haven't made any financial commitments to him, and so that's going to leave the door open. But again, as we talked about a couple last week or the week before, they're probably not going to make any financial commitments on Goff because it's not beneficial to them until next year, right? So this is a situation where the Lions are going to need quarterback depth beyond Jared Goff because he's going to be here. But how much depth, what level of depth, that's all still very up in the air. And until Goff is that long-term commitment, I think people are always going to be interested in or always going to see the Lions as a quarterback destination. So would they consider a quarterback at 18? It's a possibility. I'm not ruling it out. And and really Richardson's the only one that makes sense to me.
I'm going to go ahead and rule it out.
Okay.
Because in a vacuum, yes, this is a good strategy. Mm-hmm. Like, this is an understandable strategy. You should always be looking for a quarterback, especially if you're in position to get a quarterback. And if one of those guys is there at 18 or at 6, I get it. But given everything we know about this organization and the way that Brad Holmes acted when someone dared ask whether quarterback was on the table, I don't like. I think this team thinks they have their quarterback of the future. And drafting a guy like Anthony Richardson would kind of be spitting in Jared Goff's face a little bit. And we don't know how Jared Goff would react. I know a lot of people speculate that he wouldn't be okay with it. And you know, he's too emotionally sensitive. I don't make assumptions about people like that. I don't know. But to me, this franchise has done everything it possibly can to show everyone that they've thrown their full support behind Jared Goff, and I don't think that's an act. I don't think it's ever been an act. And after he had the season that he did, they are thinking about him as long. Like you said, there's no reason for them to financially lock themselves to Jared Goff for the future. But if he has half the season he had in the second half of this season, it's happening next offseason. They're going to give him an extension. And you're right, like, that doesn't put quarterback off the table for the rest of the draft. They do need to get a developmental guy, ideally, or at least someone to play backup. There's no one under contract right now, so they need backup guys. But I don't think it's on the table. I really don't. Mm-hmm. I'd be shocked at this point if the Lions took a quarterback in the first round.
I totally get that, and I don't want to give the impression that I think they're going to take a quarterback at 18. I don't either.
Yeah.
I think the way that they're designed, the way that they talk, the actions that they take, all point towards them being invested in Jared Goff. And if they were going to make a change, I think those changes would come next season, or next offseason, right? I don't think they're going to feel the need. The trick is that Richardson is just a dynamic player, right? He is the modern day. He has so many skills that translate to the modern day NFL. And so there's so much appeal to that. And I think that's why he's in that conversation, because if you look at his play, He's very sporadic. There's inconsistencies in decision making, inconsistencies in accuracy, but he's 6'4", 235. He's very difficult to take down. He runs like the wind. He's got a cannon for an arm. He's comfortable in the pocket. He can do all the things that Josh Allen can do, except he lacks things, right? Even more so than Josh Allen. Because remember, Josh Allen was not Josh Allen, right? At Wyoming, Josh Allen had a ton of accuracy issues. So if you think Richardson is going to develop in the same way that Josh Allen did, and you have 3 years to wait, like they did with Josh Allen, essentially, then I understand the appeal, because Richardson could be a top 5. He could develop into a top 5 guy in the NFL. That's his ceiling.
Sure.
He could also bust out after 1 year,
right?
Because he's just so in it. Like,
how many examples
no consistency
of the how many examples of the people of quarterbacks that people just fall in love with traits and they never develop? And I know a lot of these guys that I'm about to name are still young in their careers, but it goes to show you that it takes a lot of time and a lot of work to develop these guys. But like, Justin Fields is a guy who has a ton of things and doesn't have a lot to show for it in 2 years. Malik Willis is a guy that a lot of people fell in love with their traits, and he fell all the way into the 4th or 5th round or whatever it was, and he looked horrible this year. Trey Lance, what's going on in San Francisco? I know there's been injuries, but there hasn't been a lot of optimism surrounding Trey Lance either. It's an enormous risk, and it's one that the Lions just absolutely don't have to take.
Right.
And you have a golden opportunity when you have a side of the ball that stinks. The 32nd ranked by yardage, 26th or 27th or 28th by, DVOA. And sure, a defensive player can bust out just as easily. I understand that.
Yeah.
But drafting a quarterback and swinging and missing affects so much more. It affects Jared Goff. It affects Ben Johnson. It affects it's just a trickle-down effect where it's like, if you miss on a corner, you miss on a safety, okay, let's go get another one. It's not that big of a deal. It affects Brad Holmes, right? If you swing and miss on a quarterback in the first round, you might be saying goodbye to Brad Holmes in a couple of years, which you don't want to do because he's pretty darn good at everything else.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't. It's an enormous gamble, especially on a guy like Richardson, who like you said, his ceiling is extremely high, his floor is extremely low. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Just don't. You're not in a position where you have to take a risk like that.
I get it. I get it. I totally do. But there's still that glimmer of like, oh, maybe we have the right situation.
Everyone wants to go from Alex Smith to Patrick Mahomes.
No, okay, but look, I showed you the rabbit hole I went down like a week ago when with the quarterbacks and drafted in the first round, right? Like, I don't want to like bore people with all the details on that, right. But like, if you look at the quarterbacks taken in the first round over the last decade, okay, last 10 years, 14 of them are starters in the NFL. 16 of them are either backups or out of the NFL entirely, right? So right there, if you take a quarterback in the first round, you got about a 50%, a little less than 50% success rate of having that quarterback be a starter. But what you notice is that of those quarterbacks taken in like 2013, 14, 15, none of those guys are starters anymore. So like, just because you take one doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be starters for the long term. Right. And then if you start talking about taking guys in the top 6, well, then the numbers shrink even more, right? Because only of those 14 starters, only 7 of them were taken in the top 6, right? So if you're looking at like the totality of the quarterbacks taken in the first round over the last decade, and you're talking about using like a top pick on them, you really only have like a 25% chance of like getting a guy that's going to be your long-term starter. And again, we're just focusing on that first round, but the odds of that quarterback lasting compared to all the other positions are just so low.
Yeah.
That it does create a totally different animal at that position. Like it's a totally different way of looking at it, because we just spent time in between our segments here with talking with the Twitch audience about running back value, right? And we talk about how, like, when you're looking at that position, you have to put a different set of parameters on it. Well, you have to do the same thing with the quarterback. You have to put these parameters on it. And I get the risk, but when you only have a 25% chance, like, of really, like, finding that long-term guy, and there's 4 quarterbacks in this class, and that means one of them's probably going to make it and the other 3 aren't, how confident are you that the guy that makes it is going to be the guy that falls to you at 18? You know what I mean? Like, it's a big gamble. So I know, like, people are going to hear you say it's a risk, and they're going to be like, everything's risk, right? And it is, but it's a much statistically, it's a much bigger risk at the position. And so you have to have the right situation, right circumstances, and all these things in place. And you have to be confident in your analysis of that player, that player is not going to be one of the 75%. He'll be one of the 25%.
I'm going to bring up a counter point of view from our good friend and Cordy Aaron, who is definitely in the draft a quarterback tank. Says, is there really any strategic difference between drafting JMO in 2022 and drafting a quarterback in 2023? In both instances, you are taking a player with the knowledge that they will not be a contributor in the rookie season and that they will be replacing someone good. And he uses JMO replaces Chark, and whoever the Lions draft would replace Goff. What is there a key difference there that he's missing?
I mean, I get the analogy, right? Because I think that speaks to Brad Holmes's willingness to build for the future.
Sure.
But I don't think it's necessarily an apples to apples comparison, right? Because of the position, because of the things that we just kind of talked about, is that you have to look at quarterback separate from all the other positions that are out there. And each one is going to have its own little value rate. But quarterback is the one, it stands apart. Right. So why the ideology matches, I don't think you can necessarily compare them equally in that manner. But I totally get what he's saying.
Right. And no, I think the strategy of drafting for the future puts quarterback on the table. But the problem here is that you didn't have a ton of confidence in Chark going into this season. It was very, I mean, if you did, you would have given him a bigger contract. Instead, you're just like, 1-year deal. Let's see if you can make it happen, Chark. Whereas with Goff, they feel pretty darn confident about Jared Goff. And Jared Goff is 27 or 28 or whatever he is. He's still under contract for 2 more years, and you're kind of getting a bargain for him. And so I think you feel a lot more set at quarterback than you probably did at wide receiver.